Pastor Rebecca, could you please give the invocation?
Yeah, hi, I'm Pastor Rebecca Oblock from Ignite Church. As I was praying for you guys today, I came up with 2 verses I wanted to share. First one is 2 Timothy 1:7. It says, "For God will never give you the spirit of fear, but the Holy Spirit who gives you mighty power and self-control." And the other one is Joshua 1:9. That says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with you wherever you go." So I just want to open up in prayer and to encourage you and to empower you and to not lean into fear, but to be able to make decisions in courageous boldness. So Jesus, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for this meeting, and we thank you that your goodness and grace is all over this place. God, we rebuke the spirit of fear, and we receive courage. We receive courage to make hard decisions, to make wise choices. I thank you, Lord, that you unleash the spirit of wisdom and revelation in this place. And so we honor your name, and I just thank you for the cohesiveness of this team that are going to be decisive, and God, that they're going to come together as an amazing team tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. So now that it's 6 o'clock, we'll officially call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller.
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman.
Here.
McClanathan.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Busker.
Here.
Brashaw.
Here.
Meisick.
Here.
And Berberay.
Here.
Thank you. Could you please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Alderman Brashaw?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Alderman Brashaw, it's your meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much. Item number 4, approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for approval, Council?
So moved. Seconded.
We have a motion by Alderman Busker, seconded by Alderman Ross. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes. Next, number 5. We have approval of minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting on June 10th, 2019. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Borneman and a second by Alderman Meisick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? And the minutes are approved. Next, we have public comments, and I see that we do not have anyone signed up for public comments on tonight's agenda. Item number 7, we have an oath of office, Fire Chief Bradley Leggett, and this is going to be a presentation by City Manager Crow.
Brad, want to join me up here? It's my pleasure. We're going to be swearing in Brad here. After an extensive search, we selected Brad. He's retired fire chief now officially out of Beloit. He's originally from this area and here in Illinois, actually from Rock Falls, excuse me. I did it. Somebody had told me Rock. I think I'll blame that one on Shoot Towns. Rock Falls. So, but it's my pleasure to give you the oath of office. So, with that, raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I state your name.
Bradley J. Leggett.
Have been appointed as the fire chief. In the city of Freeport. In the county of Stevenson. Do solemnly swear. That I will support the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the state of Illinois. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of my appointment. According to the best of my ability. Congratulations, Brad. Welcome on board. You're welcome to. You want to step up and I'll just have you, when you get a chance, sign it.
Thank you.
Make it official.
Mayor Miller, City Manager, City Council, thank you very much. My peers, the department heads, thank you very much for the warm welcome that I've received over the last few weeks. I've been in and out of town just kind of getting to know some folks and attending a few meetings and just getting my feet wet. And today I jumped in all the way. The day flew by. It was incredibly quick. And I know that your city is in great hands. Everything I've learned about the department so far is pretty darn amazing, and I'm very pleased and honored to be part of this organization. And I'm looking forward to serving for a long time. If you would give me the opportunity, I'd like to introduce my family. If I could, please, my wife, Mary. My mother, Brenda. My sister, Kristen. All right, my daughters, my son, my oldest son, Brandon, his future wife, Maida. One of my granddaughters, Kyla. One of my granddaughters, Madison, and Grace is sitting on her lap. All right, my daughter, Caitlin, over here. Okay. And then my daughter, Mary. And then one of our best friends, Sonia. Thank you very much for being with me and sharing this moment with me today. I appreciate it. Oh, and then also the guy that isn't yet in the circle. He's trying to get into the circle. All right. Angel, sorry. I'm working on it. If you can imagine all the names I've heard today. So, I love you all and thank you for sharing this moment with me. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Leggett. We welcome you. Next on the agenda, item number 8, we will have discussion regarding approval of engineering services by Willett Huffman and Fair Graham for Adams Avenue Improvement Project. That's between Clark and South Streets. This will be presented by Director of Public Works, Dennis Carr.
Yes, thank you very much. As part of the capital improvement plan we had set forward over the past year, we've identified a few roads that were in dire need of replacement. Adams Avenue is one of those. One of the big issues we have with Adams is that it does fall on the FAU route list for IDOT, which then kind of brings us to a different pot of money that we are allowed to use. With the funding that we'd plan on using for construction, it opens up a lot more stringent items that we have to use it on and the design for it. So unlike us using local funds on roads, this has to go through the full gambit of IDOT review plus FHWA review. So as you can kind of see the limits, I believe it originally said Clark. That's more of the water main side. IDOT wants us to study from Stevenson all the way to South Street. Through that study, though, it will get pared down. They just have to have logical termini on both ends. And so with IDOT being on both sides, IDOT routes, this is kind of how they're going to want us to start. On the right, you can kind of see a picture of an area over by the armory. It's in desperate need. So we're allowed to use the surface transportation funds. So this will help us with our MFT and our funding for it. So if we break it down, the different engineering for it. So the roadway, we're going to pay for the engineering out of our motor fuel tax. Through the talks with Will Hoffman, we've got a funding. We're not to exceed about $365,000. It's going to come out of our motor fuel tax over the next 2 years. The funding for the engineering for the utilities, so that's the water main and the sanitary sewer, and then we're also going to do the surveying out of that will be capital funds. So that'll be coming out of the capital funds, that's out of the utility bill. We split them up like this as a way for us to seek that loan forgiveness that we've been talking about from the IEPA. This will allow us to keep our accounting books a little bit easier, as well as Fairgram has put together our wastewater facility plan as well as our water project program. So their familiarity with the funding or how we're pursuing the funds is why we've kind of selected them. The Willett Hoffman selection was with us using motor fuel tax and no federal money on it, on the design of it. We were allowed to choose an engineering firm that we have a history with and that is in good standing with us. With our idea of trying to keep projects local, we reached out to Willett Hoffman. Their roadway design group is top notch, so I feel like we're in really good hands with them on the roadway side. So the construction of it, these are real ballpark estimates, because you never really know what you're going to get into with IDOT until you get the plans in front of them. But for the roadway, we're looking at about $3.5 to $4 million. And then on the utility side, somewhere between that 1.5 and 2. Those numbers could shake. They could go up, they could go down, but right now that's kind of our preliminary estimates on it. So the road reconstruction limits, I kind of showed you where IDOT wants us. This is kind of more of what we're aiming for. That Float Street to the Arcade Avenue corridor, kind of seems where the worst of it's at. With us constructing up to Float Street, that seems like a pretty good termini on the northwest side. The Float Street, or the Float Avenue, I keep calling it street for some reason. The Float Avenue project is going to do a little bit in that intersection, so we would just take off from that portion and then head southeast towards Arcade. Part of the IDOT review is we've got these two six-legged intersections. Both of those are going to require a little bit more study and a little bit more in-depth look. We're going to have to do some traffic counts and then pretty much get IDOT's blessing on what we can and can't do at those intersections. That's one of the big reasons why I'm not real confident where the estimate's at yet, just because these two are a very big unknown. We don't seem to have a whole lot of crashes in that area, but IDOT, being the overseer that they are, they can really force us to do any kind of assortment of items at those two intersections. The water sewer limits, we're going to go all the way up to Douglas on this one. We're replacing a bunch of 4-inch line as well as some lines that have been broken in the past. We did a quick review and we've got about 6 water main breaks on Adams Avenue alone in the last few years. So just kind of gives you an idea of how bad that water main is in that area. And so once we're tearing up the road, we might as well take care of the sanitary sewer at the same time. So the project itself is going to be a new sidewalk, new roadway, new curb. The roadway itself is going to have to accommodate bicycle traffic. That's just how IDOT goes anymore. So it's going to have to be, it's either going to have to have bike lanes or the sidewalks are going to have to be wider to accommodate those bicyclists. So the design and the study behind it will give us the information we need to make that decision. That is the project itself. Looks like engineering is going to be right in that ballpark of about $600,000. So split between 2 different funds. So I'm open for any questions.
Chairman,
Yes, Alderman
what
Parker.
kind of timetable are we talking of start to finish?
This is not going to be able to be constructed in 1 year. I believe it's going to be a 2-year construction phase on it. I would imagine we're going to be spending 2 years on the design to get it through the IDOT process, and so we're probably looking for a 2021, 2022 construction cycles. That's what I would be guessing, as long as we don't get any hiccups on the IDOT side.
Thank you.
Questions, Alderman? Alderman Ross.
Yes, and I understand you're going to be replacing some pipe in the ground? Replacing the pipes in the ground?
Yeah, water main, sanitary sewer, and then we'll
Water
also
main,
be
okay.
in storm.
Are you going to be upgrading them to a larger size, or are you going to use the same thing that's in there?
I believe we're going to use a 12-inch pipe.
Let's see, I can speak. Yes, we have 4, 6, 8, and 12-inch. So we are going to go and upgrade to a 12-inch to at least Stevenson.
Well, that should get
Alderman Ross, yes.
so that'll help with a bigger, better flow of water to move it a lot faster, correct?
Yes, that should help with the fire flow as well.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kapansky, you're talking about the different sizes of pipes. Are these comparable to what's there now, or are you increasing the size?
Right, we are increasing the size. We have segments that are 4-inch, segments that are 6, 8, and 12. So we are going to go and have 12-inch all the way from South Street up until basically Exchange or Douglas, and then from Douglas to Exchange, we're going to go 8-inch.
And those are larger than what was currently
Correct.
in there? Okay, thank you. More questions, Alderman?
Chair.
Alderman Ross?
Okay, but when you go from, yeah, Tom, but when you reduce that size down from 12 to 8, is that going to impact going to harm anything?
Well, it's already a 6-inch or an 8-inch pipe, so we're not reducing it. We're either keeping it the same or raising it on up on that small segment from where Douglas is to Exchange. But then from Stevenson all the way south, it will be 12-inch.
Okay, so the flow is going, which way is the flow going?
Wherever it needs to go. Or let's see, are you talking about sanitary sewer or water?
Okay, which one you're going to replace with the 12?
We're going to replace the water main.
That's the water main. Okay.
We're also going to replace the sewer in this area. We've actually added it as part of our sewer waste treatment facility.
The new one. Okay.
Yeah, the sanitary is going to replace in size, like in kind. So if it's 12 now, it's going to be 12 when it gets put back.
All right. Got it.
So, Director, as far as I understand for the listening audience, instead of replacing a 12-inch with it would be replaced with a 12-inch or larger. If it's a 6-inch, it'd be a 6-inch or larger, et cetera, for water pipes.
For the water main, everything on Adams Avenue is going to be 12 inches from south to
Everything.
Stevenson.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And we had Alderman McClanathan, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the process in regards to this, with two things to note at the outset. One, I appreciate that we have good local firms that we have a good history with and that we're able to use, and I appreciate being able to look at that. And I also realize that given the professional services that we're talking about here, we don't have to bid it out in the normal process. Could you walk us through what was the process for soliciting the proposals, selecting the firms, just to ensure that we have a good balance on the engineering costs on this project?
Yeah, so a big part of the intent was to make sure we kept it local. I feel like a project like this, local firms are going to give it a little more heart and a little less brain, or same brain but more heart kind of thing. Shouldn't reduce the amount of brain. I do apologize for that. I just feel like there's more pride taken on a local project from a local firm. And so with that being thought, Fairgram has been doing our water main work and our sanitary sewer design work, and so I felt like staying with that continuity on that side was a very strong move for the city. Our familiarity with them and their familiarity with our utilities, I thought, made that as a very good pair. I also know that Willa Hoffman's, their design group is a very strong one with their roadway stuff. They're very familiar with the IDOT prerequisites and all of their formwork. They've got some past IDOT workers that are now working with Willa Hoffman, so I feel like their strength and Fairgram's strength are kind of being balanced in this project itself.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yes.
What's the thought process on stopping at float? Is it just because from the armory to float is probably the worst portion of the road, or what's the thought process on stopping on that on the road versus going down to the Stevenson-Douglas area?
Yeah, so that I know is a complete reconstruction area. Past that, to me, when I'm out there looking, it looks like it could be a mill and overlay area. So depending on how the budget kind of works out for this estimate, we could definitely do a mill and overlay up to the point where it becomes 75. The idea, though, would be to avoid hitting an IDOT roadway, so that way we don't have to deal with all the permitting, the extra permitting involved with working on their roads.
The other thing is, so the STUFAU money, we get, how much do we get per year? And basically, we have to save it up and then use it. It's better to use it one large. It has to be used on a truck route. So some of that's a limitation on how much we can do, is basically how much money is within that pot too.
Yeah, kind of how we had worked the budget out for this. At the end of this project, we were going to have completely wiped out our MFT and our STU funds based off of that estimate.
Follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
As you indicated, with it being a truck route and pretty heavy in regards to that, you're comfortable the reconstruction in that portion plus the mill and overlay potentially and the other things when you're going through on the aspect that you're hitting with water and sewer will satisfy that whole stretch, so we won't be needing to come back into any portions of that area, you wouldn't think, it for the foreseeable future?
From the arcade to the northwest, I'm not real confident about to the southeast. It looks like it's in really good shape right now. There's some drainage issues along the side of the road that's kind of weakening the edge, but I do feel very confident this project would make the road last from the Arcade Avenue all the way up to Stevenson.
Okay, thank you.
Council, do we have any other questions for Director Carr or Manager Crow regarding this?
Chair,
Yes?
thanks. I didn't catch fully what you said about bike lanes and sidewalks. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so part of using the federal funds, the surface transportation funds, is IDOT wants you to bring it up to a complete streets idea, which is for all users. So bicyclists, walking pedestrians, and then also road traffic, not rail traffic, but road traffic. So currently what we have out there is not pedestrian friendly. I mean, there's no sharrows or any kind of pedestrian markings for the bicyclists. So IDOT is going to require us make this route, if we're going to use those funds, it's going to have to be ped friendly as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Barrera.
Thank you. If it's going to be more people and bike friendly, we're going to have an improved road. We're going to have more trucks, maybe more speed. I recall when Galena was done going all the way out to the Holiday Inn, speed seemed to pick up just because it was a much better road. How do we merge that people traffic and truck traffic and car traffic with safety wise?
I mean, the safety aspect is all things that we'll have to. That's part of the study for IDOT. They're going to want us to have numbers and stuff like that. So safety-wise, I mean, we will have to look at that. My guess is we're going to try to keep the bicyclists off the road. We seem like we've got plenty of green space right now between the road and the sidewalk to make those wider.
Follow up?
Yes.
Again, on the bicycle, would that be similar to the bicycle sidewalk paths going out on Empire?
Not as wide because they'll be on
Not as
both
wide.
sides. But there, I guess I shouldn't say that because I can't do the design right now without IDOT or, for that matter, Willet Hoffman. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be really putting the brains to it. But you could either go a wider sidewalk on each side, or you can do like the Empire, where you can go a 10-foot path on one side if you've got enough green space.
Okay,
So just depending on how the grades work out, we'll.
thank you.
Alderman, we do have Willett and Huffman representatives here, or Fairgram. If you have any questions for them, would anyone entertain to want to speak directly to them or ask them a question?
Chair, I have one more for Director Carr.
Alderman Ross?
Okay, as we said, we're going to be doing the sidewalks. I do notice that I do see a lot of handicap accessible people riding in the roadway instead of on the sidewalk. So they will be handicap accessible too, correct?
Yes,
The approaches and,
we're not allowed to use IDOT funding to upgrade a road without making it ADA accessible the whole way.
yeah, yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, because you constantly see them riding right along the curb with little flag, and I'm wondering why they're not on the sidewalk, but it's understandable.
Yeah, our sidewalks are a little rough.
Thank you.
Chair,
Alderman Borneman?
I noticed we're talking about bike paths. Has there been discussions about bringing in the firm that's doing our comprehensive plan to kind of work together when it comes to design?
So both Director Carr and I were on the infrastructure, as was Director Kapansky, as was
Both Dale and Adam.
both the Willett Hoffman, and so we've all put inputs into this, and that is incorporated within the comprehensive plan, as well as county representatives, school representatives as we went forward. So,
Are there any other questions to entertain? Manager Crow, I have a question for you. I saw a notation that the staff is requesting that the council enter into a contract with Willett and Huffman. Would you like to see this moved perhaps to the next council meeting?
I would, Madam Chairman.
Do you have anything else you would like to add to
No.
this?
I think it was covered well by Director Carr and Director Kopansky.
Director Carr and Director Kompanski, thank you very much for all your thought and insight into this. So council, I would entertain a motion to move this to our next regularly scheduled council meeting, which would be July 15th, I believe.
So moved.
We have a motion by Alderman Busker,
Second it.
and we have a second by Alderman Ross to move this forward. So we will see that on the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Thank you very much, Director.
No problem.
Next on our agenda, item number 9, we have discussion regarding approval of contract from Willett Huffman for the former City Hall wall repair. This also will be presented by Public Works Director Carr.
I don't have near as good a PowerPoint presentation this time. Structural design has never been my forte, but I did put some pictures out here, so that way everybody can know exactly what wall we're kind of talking about. When Old City Hall was torn down, this shared wall was kind of left over, and kind of looking through the different pictures itself, you can kind of see what we're left with. Which, I mean, that's no fault of any contractor. That's just the condition of a shared wall that was left over. The bid package that I put together didn't have anything about resurfacing this wall. If I were to think about it again, I'd have put that in there, especially based off of the 5-year funding that we were allowed to get on that. But as you're kind of looking through these different pictures, there's a lot of holes and a lot of gaps, unevenness in the roof. All of these things that kind of make a wall look ugly are kind of sitting here. There's a closet that we would need to fill in, as well as blocking the doorway.
It actually goes back in, if you walk back, Dennis and I have been back in this closet. This closet actually goes back in, and the back wall of the closet is the side wall of the building, the next building over.
It's a beautiful closet. You could store a lot of mops in there right now. So as we keep kind of going down the building, we've got other little gaps that we need filled. This one looks like an old delivery opening, maybe for when it was the fire department. I'm not sure what that would have been for, but so you can see the old tile from the old staircase kind of going up. And then if you look on the far right, there's even actually another drain that got kind of mortared in. So these are all items. And I showed all these pictures to Dale when I met him out on site. And we had originally reached out to Hanson out of Rockford. They've got the closest structural engineer to Freeport. So I reached out to them. After talking with them, they let me know that masonry's not really their forte. So I reached back to the firms that are local. Dale let me know that he could get a structural engineer pretty quick. Bear Graham, the structural engineer, is out of either Springfield or Carbondale, so it's a little bit farther away. So this is an approach we did with a local firm to try to keep it as local as possible. And looking at the hours, the contract, they've kind of got it split up between the bid and construction phase, the bid phase, and then the construction phase itself. So each of those phases we could absolutely discuss, and if we don't need anybody out in construction, I mean, we can eliminate some of these portions to kind of bring that funding down. But the proposal itself is for $29,000 for the plan work on that, and that would get us out to bid, and then we would have to seek a contractor for the construction of it itself.
Director Carr, before I ask the rest of the council for their questions, my question is, it's for engineering only service, correct? Is that the $29,000?
Yes.
And do you even have a guesstimate of how much it would cost to do the repair itself?
I do not.
So
Manager Crowe?
for the council, for your information, the estimate that we have to put it in, Cost is $110,000 to repair the wall along Joe's Pizza, and the estimate for the one along Abet Books, just to put it, is in the area of 108 to 160,000, depending on the amount of work that's. And Fairgraham was the one that gave us the estimate for Abet, so that kind of gives you what the feeling is on the repair on this wall. When we got into this project initially, we did not believe, based upon the discussion, that we had as much problems with the common wall, based upon the owner. And fortunately, when we tear down a building, you find other issues involved here with this. So it's that.
Manager Crowe, thank you for that information. Now, council, we'll have discussion. First questions?
Chair,
Alderman McClanathan.
thank you. First question to either Manager Crowe or the Director Carr. Are we done? I mean, I'd ask the same question, and you've talked a little bit about you reached out to Hanson, but are we done on the bid process or on the solicitation of proposals or anything of that nature process on this? And this is the only one you want us to review on that, or where do we stand on all this?
After talking with Fairgraham, they let me know that they could do this, and they could put in a package for it. But I also would like to reaffirm to council that engineering fees cannot be, I mean, that's not a bid process itself. I mean, we could put out a request for qualifications on them, but even before we can talk any kind of numbers, we'd have to make sure we select a firm before we can enter into contract negotiations with them.
Follow up?
Yes.
Right, and what did we do in regards to the request for qualifications in regards to this? If any, I know it's discretionary in regards to that. I'm just asking, what was the process on this one?
So the process was, I knew the structural engineers at Hanson, so I'd reached out to them. When they let me know that they weren't willing to do that work, then I reached out to both Willett Hoffman as well as Fairgraham on the local aspect. I was trying to keep our local as we could on the structural engineer, knowing that neither Willett Hoffman or Fairgraham has a local structural engineer. And then at that point, as soon as I figured out we had no local structural engineers, then it was to reach out to the local firms. And at that point, after speaking with Fairgraham and them letting me know that their structural engineer is way down south and Willett Hoffman's was a lot closer, that's why we went with them.
As we go forward, and Director Carr and I talked, we would like to have a discussion with Willett Hoffman about the overall cost on this. I'm not looking for approval here on this. So I'd like to readdress with them the overall cost on this. So, but we did want to get it in front of council to understand where we're going here as we're going forward. The other engineering, we had reached the other two engineering firms in the area. IMEG, we have some concerns about their structural. We've had some issues with their structural. That's why we didn't approach them. And CMT showed no interest whatsoever, and they don't have a structural engineer in this area.
Follow up?
Yes.
Thank you, Manager Grove, for the additional explanation. And turning to what you said in regards to talking about the process, on here. Obviously, it's an interesting project. Probably a lot of unknowns. We had the fill-in, obviously on the lower level. What type of assessments did we do so before they filled it in, so that we know what we're dealing with, or whoever comes in knows what they're dealing with on the area that's below what we can see right now?
There wasn't much of an assessment at all on the lower level.
Follow up?
Yes.
Is that part of what we're gonna have to, again, I'm not, an engineer, structural or otherwise, but is that part of what we're gonna have to be analyzing when we're moving forward here?
They're going to have to analyze if there's any water coming into the neighboring building, as well as how to make sure that everything above ground is watertight as well.
Follow up?
Yes.
Are we in communication with the owner or owners, since we're dealing with, it's a short block, I guess, on the north-south, but are we in communication with the owners, and will we be bringing them in for communications with the firms as we're moving forward?
Yes, we will be in communication with the neighbors.
And we have been in communication with the owners to this point, and I talked directly with one that said that we were going to be discussing it here at this council meeting as we go forward, so, or this committee of the whole.
Chair?
Yes.
It goes back to the question kind of that Alderperson Bradshaw was raising. Since there's a lot of unknowns, we don't really have a cost estimate. What's kind of well, walk me through the process here in regards to, we work obviously with, the engineering firm for all the things that are laid out in the packet that you gave us. And then we start getting back some figures in regards to that. How much flexibility are we going to have to, one, make sure that we're not going into a huge money pit, but also two, making sure that we've got a satisfactory level of work so we don't, like the building across from the courthouse, it's been X years, but you're already seeing that there's some things that might need to be redone on that. How much flexibility do we have in that process, both administratively and then as a council moving forward?
So, I mean, once the design is done and if we go with this proposal in the next council and Willa Hoffman kind of gets us through to the bid document phase, there's nothing that says that we can't say, hey, this is going to be way too much, let's wait, or anything like that. So we don't have to put it out for bid. If it comes in too expensive at the moment, then we could choose different ways of tidying up that location that might be cheaper. So I mean, on that aspect, there is that. I mean, just because we're designing, it doesn't mean that it would have to be constructed. I mean, that's the recommendation. But if funding isn't there, it can always be tabled and pursued at a different time or under a different financial philosophy. If we need to do another one where it's over 5 years, I'm sure there's going to be local contractors that would be willing to work with us on that.
Final follow-up.
Yes, Alderman.
I guess overall, one, thank you. I appreciate you guys bringing this forward. We need to do something on it. It's going to be a little tricky, so that's kind of why I've been asking the questions in regards to, I don't want to get too deep until we find out fully what we're doing, but my overall sentiment is, obviously, as many people have said, both businesses, administration, council, we need to clean it up. So appreciate all you were involved in helping us get to that next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Burberry.
Thank you. City Manager Kreis, I assume we own the land. City owns the land.
We do.
Do we technically own the wall?
I would say probably we own the wall up to, the problem is it's a common wall.
Common wall.
And so what we found out in dealing with Joe's and dealing with Abet, Steve did a lot of research on the common wall, and he literally had to go back to the era of the Magna Carta
Oh, my goodness.
to find there is very little law dealing with this.
I think he was trying to stonewall you.
And it dealt with the separation and where the common wall comes in and who actually owns it. And so, and it had to deal with whether we were allowed to fix, because we had an owner that was not willing to allow us access to the property, but whether we were actually allowed to fix the wall on Joe's.
Did that answer your question, Alderman Burberry? I keep stumbling on your name. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Call me Burb. If the city were to want to develop that property with a private developer, would that developer take over some of that cost of the wall or improvement? Or
The concern is the owner of the owners of the other building are concerned about damage that they may sustain into that. So the answer is yes. If there was a developer, I was actually in discussions with the people that are talking with the church about taking over that piece of property, but that fell through when they did not want the church.
Manager Crow, this is from me. I understand the need to improve this building, and I'm all for that. We are looking here at a cost, a large cost. So we were looking, first of all, if we do go with one of the engineering firms, how will we pay for this? Have you and Director Bucas discussed this?
We have not yet had this discussion, so.
No magic is coming from anywhere with that money, Director Bucas?
Well, I've got a couple ideas. As far as paying for engineering, taking that out of our Fund 36, which is our neighborhood
Can you
program.
repeat that? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Yes, I'm sorry. As far as paying for the engineering, the $29,000 or less, taking the funds out of Fund 36, which is our neighborhood redevelopment fund. And then I haven't had a chance to talk to the city manager about how I would pay for the construction of what had to be done, depending on how much has to be done. I do have something in the back of my mind that I don't want to publicly state at this time, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you for that information, Director Bucas. And then again, if time is of the essence, if the owner of the other building is worried about their building crumbling, what are we looking for as a time frame to get this underway?
So we're looking to, I want to have a discussion, more discussions than I've expressed that with Director Carr, with Will Hoffman, as we go forward on this, on the cost and what the scope of this is, and get it approved. We've also got some other challenges there. So the electric box, that is, if you see on the electric box, what we have found working with ComEd is the city does not actually own that electric box. That is owned by the building owners. And so ComEd is looking at.
I don't have that picture.
Oh, you don't
That's
have
what
that
I'm
picture?
looking for, so.
Yeah, if you look down at the corner,
Okay.
and the building owners are going to, of the buildings, are going to have to relocate and pay, and we have to work out the details on how that box is going to have to be relocated, because it was built within the old city hall. That is the power for those, not only those buildings, but huge resources. And talking with ComEd, so they're gonna have to relocate that box, maybe put it into a vault. So there's some other challenges that we've been having discussions as we go forward. One of the things, as we tore down City Hall, the old City Hall, one of the things we found is that Frontier had run all of their had run all of their phone lines through old City Hall. So we had to go through them before. Kurt worked to relocate their phone lines. It was like it was a central location, so all these things are built within the City Hall, and we're now trying to undo some of those things as well.
I see. Manager Crow, I have another question for you. If they're looking at relocating this electric box and or vaulting it, do we bear the brunt of the cost of that, or does Commonwealth Edison kick in some of that, or what happens there?
They do not. The discussion, and both the mayor and I were in discussion with them, they don't feel like that they own the cost, that this is a private cost, whether it's the building owners or we or a combination of us have to relocate that.
And sir, did they give you an estimate of the cost from low and to high?
They did not. They were going to have their engineers look at it.
That's pretty scary. Council, do we have any other questions regarding this?
Chair?
Yes, Alderman Misick.
So my understanding, the main areas of risk are around structural analysis, and really you don't know until you start taking samples and really looking at this, right? In similar work that's been done, I know Manager Crow was talking about this, given the size of some of the walls that have been repaired in the past, and we look at size here, I'm not exactly sure comparable.
They're very comparable in
Okay.
size. So in fact, I would say Joe's was even tougher, because they had to restabilize Joe's building before they could fix the walls. They've actually had to put stabilization beams in it. I am not sure, but I'm not a structural engineer by trade. You know, it's I don't see the building collapsing in on itself. You know, Fisher even dropped a beam down on top of the building next to it. There was some damage to the roof, but they fixed that damage. So, But the thing that you have here is, because there are literally three, if you look at it, there are literally three buildings built in that area next to it. One is 2 stories, one's a single story, and then it goes back to 2 stories. And that is something we did not have, because it was a constant 3 stories on both Abet and Joe's Pizza. So that's a challenge as we go forward.
Council, any other questions at this time? Well, Director Carr and Manager Croy, I appreciate all the information, and also Director Bucas on funding mechanisms possibly for this project. And at this time, we'll let the department heads take it back to the table and do their magic with getting more information to the council. With that said, we'll move on to item number 10.
Actually, Alderman
Excuse me?
Brashaw, Attorney Zito brought to my attention that he would like us to be consistent in taking a vote. And when you put on the floor for the last one, there was a motion made to move that forward. And so he would like to actually have a vote on that motion. It was made by Busker and seconded by Ross.
Item number 8, Mayor?
Correct.
Thank you. We're going to back up just a moment then. I was amiss in this. Discussion regarding the approval of the engineering services by Willett, Huffman, and Fairgraham for Adams Avenue Improvement Project between Clark and South Streets, presented by Director Carr. We had a motion by Alderman Busker and seconded by Alderman Ross to move that forward, and we need a roll call vote. Is a voice vote? Excuse me. We're going to have a voice vote for item number 8. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? And so that motion passes for item number 8. Again, I apologize for not moving that forward. Item number 9 was just discussion only, and we're done with that discussion, so we will be moving on to item number 10. And I believe this is just for discussion only also.
That is correct. It's so, this is the discussion, and the reason why this is discussion only, I still have not gotten a response back from Gill and Mooring's attorney as to, they're still under review of the contract. But I wanted council, as I brought it forward to council, I wanted to make sure that I had captured everything that council was concerned about in the discussion we had with the contract. We added in there is in the Gills and Mooring contract, this was reviewed by Director Bucas, myself, and Attorney Zito. We've established the rates. We've talked about the replacement of the toters, the cost of an additional toter, recycling. We have also put in there a reopener if the transfer station closes, to renegotiate the contract as we go forward, and to reduce the cost, or even open it up to new bidding if that is where we desire to go on it. So it's just to remind everybody that the transfer station contract is up for renewal in 3 years. So at that point, we'll have a discussion with them about whether or not that is still feasible. They still want to keep the transfer station as we move forward. If there's anything additional you want there, so as I said, they're still reviewing the contract. So if there's any additional feedback on the contract as we go forward, this is an opportunity to ask us questions, the 3 of us questions about the contract, and talk about things that we may not have captured that is the desire of council.
Manager Crow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask the first question, if you don't mind. With the transfer station only open 3 more years, and
the contract is only for 3 more years. They may want to, if nothing else, we want to make sure the contract for the transfer station and the contract for garbage match each other. So if they decide to close it, we have an option to reopen the contract for negotiations. That's what's written in the contract. If they decide to keep it open, then we'll make the transfer station contract only 7 more years.
Thank you very much. That's what I was going to ask for, the alignment, and I appreciate that. Council, open for discussion?
Chair,
Yes, Alderman McClanathan.
thank you. The cost for replacement toter was blank under the draft. Do we have a figure? Or
They initially told us $75 per replacement toter.
that's what we're going to be putting in?
It is.
Okay.
For the listening public, we have before us 35 pages regarding this garbage contract. And I don't often tell people that because some of our pages we've had for other items tonight were over 54 pages for different contracts. So there's a lot of information for us to go over and read all the small print. So it takes a while to get all those questions.
The one, so I'll bring it to, there is a change on operating hours too. We've had some complaints because the original contract started at 4 o'clock in the morning. I've discussed with them to start it at 4:30 and run until 5. And that was, so the original contract was to allow them to start at 4. So that's a change that we've made in this. They also had initially in the old contract, there was a call for bulky household waste could be picked up at the cost and determined by, it was basically, it would be billed to the city. We are now changing that contract that the individual can contact the company for bulky waste and they will be individually billed by Mooring and Gills. So the city, it will not be rolled into the cost as we go forward. And that's because discussion with them is they aren't getting a lot of bulky waste. What they are getting is requests for basically dumpsters to be delivered to people's homes. So when they were talking about bulky items, that was like the refrigerators, stoves, along that line. They had to be, the other thing was they had to be under the, it required that all Freon had to be removed from them as going forward. So that was, we set that up, so that is direct negotiation between the resident and Mooring and Gills for bulky items. The other thing is we did get some questions, and I've got clarification. We do have to put, so if anybody has bought stickers already, they can turn those back in after they go to toters, so they don't have to use the stickers for the bags. And just, I know we had some questions about additional toters. These toters will hold up to 6 loosely fit bags, and they said with some work they may get a 7th or 8th bag into them, so there's more room into them. Recycling, the other thing is recycling is every other week versus every week, so, and that'll be with the toters as well. And we, in the cost schedule, we added that into this. The last contract actually called them to come back to council to on a yearly basis. They didn't do that, to renegotiate every cost, and we've said per the cost schedule that we had negotiated with them.
Manager Crowe. I've only been the senior alderperson for a very short time, as you know, and I'm not that senior, I'd like to think. Many years ago, we had some wars with garbage pickup times, and I had several constituents that called me up and cussed me out very early in the morning, usually at 4:45 a.m., 4:50, 4:53 a.m., around the hospital ward area because they did not want their trash picked up before 5 a.m. If they're pushing for a 4 a.m. pickup time to start?
The actual original contract was 4 a.m.
Yeah, and then now we're pushing for 4:30. I wish it was 5 o'clock, just so I don't have to have those early wake-up calls from my constituents.
The only reason why we went to 4:30 versus 5, because I have gotten some of those same calls, some of those same complaints, is the way they work is the same driver that's doing the garbage pickup is going to do the recycling pickup. So what they do is they'll pick up garbage in the morning, recycling in the afternoon. So they felt in order to get the route done in time, that was the reason why they had to start where they were.
What do I tell the constituents? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, can I go back to sleep now? Well, I appreciate that information. Council, do we have questions for Manager Crowe?
I do.
Yes, Alderman Berberay.
Regarding the item on recyclable materials shall be placed out, blah, blah. The contractor may require separation of paper products from non-paper. In addition, the contractor may require the following preparation of recycled materials to prepare them in certain ways. Is it gonna start that way, or will the contractor change his or her
It's-
mind over the years based on needs?
So
Scrap?
this is something that they have really stressed with us, that they're trying to, the recycling world in today is changing almost daily. So they are taking recycling the way they we are working with another group to get out a flyer on what is acceptable and not acceptable in trash, garbage, and recycling. Like, one of the things is they're being rubber or plastic doesn't necessarily mean it's recyclable, and it has to be completely washed out, whether it be glass or plastic or paper, and they cannot take corrugated cardboard that has come in contact with food waste. So pizza box, and they can't take styrofoam. What happened, kind of a scary notion, is that currently the recycling they're picking up in Freeport, only about 30% of it's actually recyclable. So part of the contract is they are now required to be involved in the education. This new contract is involved in the education of the individuals as we go forward with the contract for recycling. We saw the recycling market change 3 times while we were negotiating this contract. What we found out, Gills is, and the other thing that we're finding out that's happening is, like, so Gills is no longer, they are no longer a local firm. They're actually owned by the 3rd largest waste and recycling hauler in the United States. The days of mooring of the independent hauler is going away. So that will be changing the recycling and the way they're doing it. And we may even be doing what, Randy, they told us within 10 years, unless there's some major changes, the recycling may go away in the United States altogether. The good news is that Consolidated Waste Consolidations owns their own plastic, or subsidizes their own plastic recycling center in the Chicagoland area. So that's why they're continuing able to do that. But that was the reason why that language is in there.
Thank you, Manager Crowe. A lot of people don't realize recycling is a science. And in research myself, I found out that if you have a water bottle, you want to recycle it, you must screw the lid back on the empty water bottle. If you have an aluminum can, you don't crush it, because anything that's smaller than a fist is not able to be sorted by the machine. So people that crush their cans first, they don't get picked up. They crush the bottles, they don't get picked up. These are all going into regular trash then. So it's all an education process. The council, the city staff, hopefully the Journal Standard will all help us educate the public in what can and cannot be recycled. Illinois is one of the few states where we still have some recycling available. Freeport's one of the few cities. I would like to see it stay in effect. So anyhow, that's just my little 2 cents there. Do we have other questions regarding this garbage contract, Council?
Chair.
Yes, Alderman Misick.
So on page 34, it gives a bit of a list on the fee schedule. I know it was discussed a little bit on having options for additional if the toter doesn't fit all the waste for a given week. It looks like it still has an option 1 for extra waste, and it lists the sticker. So is that like for a short time?
Well, that's for short time. We're still in discussion about the sticker, whether they're going to actually allow us to put, they would prefer not to do that, but it's still on there.
Okay, and then
Director Bucos can step in on this.
Director Bucas?
Thank you. They prefer not to use the stickers, but to use the totes, but if they have to, and what I've seen in other places, I'm not sure whether they're gonna do this or not, is that means the driver has to get out, put the bag that's got the sticker on it into the tote, and then the mechanical arm will pick it up and deliver it. So that's why they really don't wanna have anything extra. They really would prefer 2 toters than just the one with bags.
Thank you, Director Bucus. Council, any other questions?
Chair?
Yes, Alderman Borneman.
I have a couple. So the additional toter is just a one-time fee of $75,
Yes.
and that's for as many years as you have it?
That's a good question. I'll get back to you.
Next, so that you'd consider this to be a draft of what the contract would be?
It is.
Um,
We're not ready to go because I still don't have their comments back. This is strictly, we submitted it to them 2 weeks ago and we haven't gotten their comments back yet, so.
All right, thank you. And then last question.
Yes.
The land waste option, looks like a landscape waste option. There's 2 options here. Is that something that's going to be a policy decision going forward, or is that decided by what party?
That is actually, the 2 options is what was in the current contract, and it just rolled it back over. If we want to change that, if the council wants me to go to a single option, we did not negotiate the land waste. Any changes in the land waste contract, that was not a discussion. So that is actually, basically the homeowner negotiates that directly with them, so.
Those are just 2 options available to
Right.
the homeowner? Okay. And then, what's somewhat off topic, there's been some looking into what it would be to have just a area to dump waste in the city for that.
We have a memo that we have prepared, the staff has prepared. I'm going to forward that to you, and look at that, at the costs. I don't have it here.
No, I wouldn't expect you to, but that's an option we're looking into as
We
well.
are, that is strictly for limbs and trees, the dumping of that, not yard waste as it is, so.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Parker.
Yes, all the re-education we need on recyclable, is there any way we can get printed material to hand out the Watchman meetings and try to explain it to them?
So we are working with a separate group that is developing that. In fact, I've met with them the last 2 Mondays. Diane, myself, it's headed up by Sandy Fever. So
Will be something then.
she is putting that together, flyer together.
Yes, Alderman Borneman.
Since we're still waiting and kind of, you would say we're in negotiations at this point, there's no set time of when the toters are going to hit the.
So no, they've actually said, since we approved, they're ordering the toters now, because the bid price was approved by council. They're going to be delivering in the last 2 weeks in September. Their goal is to start collection with toters the first week in October.
And prior to that, if I can.
Yes.
This education, because looking through this, I mean, it is a lot of obligations on the consumer or producer, however they phrase it here. So we're going to get that started as soon as we can. Is that the plan?
That's the plan.
Great.
Manager Crowe, I have one more question. The original contract that we were to discuss is supposed to begin July 1st and go to June 30th of next year. Is that correct?
No, this is a 10-year contract if we go. So it was supposed to originally
But yearly, it starts July.
July 1st. What happens is we'll continue on with the current contract until the new one's signed.
Until it's negotiated and signed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions? If not, we will move on to the next item. Item number 11. Discussion regarding Liquor Commission recommendation to grandfather in recently annexed gaming parlors. You have an ordinance in your packet to look over, and this is going to be presented by Attorney Steve Cox.
Evening, Council. What you have in front of you is a pretty simple looking amendment. Give you a little bit of background on where we're coming from on this and where this proposed change came from. when the properties were annexed, donut hole annexations, which went through a few months ago, I think specifically May 30 was the effective date of that. There were 2 properties in that area on South Street which were at that point issued liquor licenses by the County of Stevenson. They had state and county liquor licenses. One of those establishments, South Street Slots, was also issued and operating, as everyone knows, as a gaming parlor, gaming establishment, and had been licensed by the county and the state. The other establishment, which is Silver Creek Gaming Lounge, has applied for a gaming license with the state, but has not yet been granted that license. It's under application, or under consideration. The gaming board only meets every so often, so it just hasn't been taken up yet. And before we go any farther, I think I've disclosed this on multiple occasions. If you pull things up online, I am the registered agent for both of those corporations. So that has, at this point, nothing is adversarial. If you ask me what you can and can't do as a council according to the strict letter of the law, I can answer that. If you ask me what you should or should not do, I will probably refer you to Attorney Zito to consider that, because that would create a conflict for me. And I just want to make sure that that is out there and that everybody's aware of that. What I've brought to you tonight, however, is nothing more than the Liquor Commission's recommendation. When those properties were brought in, so with that background, when those properties were brought in, they were brought in as R3, and they still sit there as R3 residential properties. We're in the process of fixing that. We're taking that up.
So I'm going to jump in here real quick. So everybody understands that our ordinance states upon annexation, all properties will be annexed in as R3 properties. So what we did as a planning, we as a staff, we went out and looked at the properties and said, here's our recommendation. And Andrew Zubkov, Director Zubkov, was very involved with that. And we took that and gave that initial input into the Planning Commission, last Planning Commission meeting. That we then gave the owners 30 days to come in based upon our recommendations. We gave them, they could come in, and we basically did a public hearing with the Planning Commission, so they were all able to all step up and say, here's what I feel my property is. And we actually left that meeting open. We didn't close that meeting, so that any time after that time frame, they could come in and talk to Director Zubkov and say, this is what I'd like to do. On Thursday, we are taking that back to both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Commission to go forward, to make a recommendation to come forward to council at the next council meeting.
So from the zoning perspective, we're still trying to correct that. From a licensing perspective, it's quite similar. When properties come in, they don't come in as licensed. I was pleased to see the chair's use of the air quotes around grandfathered, because there is no such thing really in terms of licenses. Right now, things are just sort of in limbo, and there's not a great deal of precedent for that. So this is intended to fix that issue. Because right now, either of these establishments are undoubtedly ineligible for a license under our current ordinance, either for liquor or for gaming. Clearly, that's not the intent. The intent was for the council to take this up and figure out what to do with these licenses, and that's what we're doing. What the Liquor Commission recommended is that both establishments be grandfathered in all respects. So what you have in front of you, the modification to section 80603 talks about any licensee who is a holder of a liquor license validly issued by Stevenson County as of the date of the annexation, adopted by the city on May 20th. That's obviously only 2 establishments. There were only 2 establishments which were annexed and were the holders of liquor licenses at that point. What this says is that those will be treated the same as any of our other grandfathered licensees, which is Dottie's, Tenpenny, and a few others which are not actually parlors, which are just liquor licensees that had their gaming licenses early and prior to the adoption of our restrictions, which are that a restaurant be maintained on the premises at all times, that 50% of the revenue be derived from gaming, and that certain square footage requirements be established for that restaurant. So this would effectively treat South Street and Silver Creek identically and say that they are eligible for gaming licenses so long as they comply with the other provisions of licensing. And also, I would just point out that we say while we have the hood up and our hands are greasy, there was I'd call it an oversight, I guess, in the surveillance camera section 80621. We got a couple calls from one call from one of our catering licensees that asked about surveillance cameras, and clearly that wasn't the intent. So the Tier 3 licenses are catering and the rental halls, so they are not required to have surveillance cameras at all times.
Mayor Miller, I have a question for you. You are on the Liquor Commission currently, correct? Was it a unanimous vote to make this the ruling, a recommendation, I should say, from the Liquor Commission?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I would like to read that out loud then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It says, this would allow both South Street Slots and Silver Creek Gaming Lounge to be issued supplemental V licenses without the need to comply with the 50/50 rule or otherwise operate a restaurant R or LR status. Is that correct, Manager Crow? Okay, it goes on. This is the same exemption granted to Dottie's and 10 Pennies and a few more, but the others were actually in compliance with the 50/50 rule per disclosures as of the last renewal. There is similarly no sunset on this approval. Okay, Council?
So,
Excuse me, Mayor?
and we were honest with both those businesses, and we told them that we have had discussions in the past about sunsetting that, and then how will that look, whether that's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, but we have not moved forward on any of those things yet, but we did tell them that those are things that we have discussed.
Thank you, Mayor. Council questions? Alderman Parker.
It's not a statement, out of many hours of discussion on this annexation, we basically promised them grandfathering in, so I'm totally in favor of grandfathering them in.
Alderman, any other questions?
Chair,
Yes, Alderman McClanathan.
thank you. We did talk about grandfathering, but we also talked substantially at length in regards to, is there going to be some sunset provisions, periods of that nature, and then also is there going to be a distinction between a business that's already established versus a prospective business? So along those lines, I mean, if I recall from some of the discussion, they were saying that they were looking, before the annexation, they were looking at upwards of 4 of these businesses in here. Now, obviously, the commission didn't look at the 2 that never got off the ground anyway. But what was the logic and discussion at the Liquor Commission level for, I get South Street Slots. They had a liquor license, they have a gaming license, so they were already in the door, not operating under the rules that it should have been for within a donut hole, but they're within the door. What was the discussion at the Liquor Commission level for the second establishment? I believe it was Silver Creek, which doesn't even have a gaming license, for basically blessing that.
My take, and Mayor, please jump in if I misstate anything. My understanding of the reasoning at the Liquor Commission level was that both businesses, South Street obviously was operating, Silver Creek had spent significant sums in terms of remodeling the building and getting that ready to be up and running. My understanding is it would be ready to be up and running as a gaming establishment. If approved, they could open the doors right away. So I think they were looking at, what the expenditures were and.
Well, and even more than that, the Silver Creek legitimately had their liquor license prior to any of our annexation stuff, and they've also had their filing for their video gaming prior to that as well. So the Liquor Commission determined that it's not their fault that the state meets like once every 6 months. So because of that, they thought that they should bring it forward, because if they met every month, they would have been no different than the other one. So they would have already been licensed. So that's where they came into the thought of grandfathering, even though they aren't completely a business of video gaming. It's not their fault. They did all the paperwork prior to annexation.
Follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
And why was there no discussion regarding sunset provisions?
there was a brief discussion regarding sunset provisions, and I think the Liquor Commission simply made the determination to go ahead and grandfather them and grant them the same status as Dottie's and Tenpenny. I think that that was probably done with full knowledge that the council was considering that sort of approach generally, and I think their recommendation was to make the recommendation and throw it to council for the ultimate decision.
Chair, follow.
Yes.
This is substantially the same liquor commission that brought us these 50% requirements in the first place under the revisions, and we're setting forth a policy of not having standalone gaming parlors in perpetuity going forward, correct?
Sure, yes.
Follow-up. Then there's no prohibition on this council for setting and establishing any sunset provisions that we'd want moving forward on this, is there?
No, as a matter of fact, if anything is going to be granted, the council has to do that through a code revision, because as I said at the outset, right now, these businesses are sort of hanging out there. They aren't eligible for anything under our current licenses. They would have to change immediately to conform to the 50%, and I don't think that wasn't what was intended. I think whatever the council does with this and how it decides to treat it is a matter of granting effectively a licensing exemption, and that's what we're looking at doing here in some form or another. But it has to be done through a change to the code because the existing code doesn't allow it. I should point out, I'm sorry, I'm over answering the question, but
Go ahead.
We talked about the zoning coming in as R3. This isn't zoning. Okay, this isn't something where you get a legal non-conforming use or something where you get to continue using it. Licensing authority for municipality is much different, and much more latitude is granted. When you're dealing with zoning, you're dealing with property rights, and when we're dealing with licensing, it's a privilege, not a right. So it comes to the council to grant whatever privileges there are. So
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I see a little distinction, just looking where I'm going forward. I do see a bit of a distinction between the 10 pennies and Dottie's and this scenario, and it's substantially this. And I don't lay the fault at either South Street Slots or Silver Creek in regards to this. When 10 pennies and Dottie's was given their exemption on this, it was part of a approximately year-long overhaul of the liquor code, and they brought this all back to us. When 10 pennies and Dottie's came into existence, they were in compliance with the city code as it stood. The city code changed, the city changed substantially the rules on it, and so we said because of that, we'll allow this exemption. However, they can't transfer ownership and unless the new owners come into compliance on there. We have a situation here where, again, I'm not really putting the blame on the feet of the businesses that were looking to do this, but there's certainly the county was fully aware that there were that you should be applying these city rules, and so yes, we've annexed, but these should have been subject to city rules in the first place, as opposed to the city coming in and changing the city code on it. So, in that light, I don't need any convincing in regards to the South Street Slots portion. In regards to that, they already had their liquor, they got their gaming. I'm fine with that. I could be persuaded on the Silver Creek to go along with that too. But I do think that there should be significant consideration to giving some sort of sunset provision. I'd argue somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 years. I'm open to discussion on that. That allows these individuals and entities to transition if they want to transition, but it's also not giving them a hard closed door right out the gates. It kind of gives some balance in regards to that. So, laying my cards out on the table, those are my thoughts on that situation, and I'm open to other alderpersons' thoughts on this as well.
Thank you, Alderman McClenathan, for your perspective on that. And instead of asking Attorney Cox on this one, I'll ask Attorney Zetto. What would your recommendations be to council regarding a sunset clause? Would you think a 3 to 5 year range would be fair, or would you recommend longer or not at all, and why?
He wants to hear the answer.
You know, I could give you an opinion or my thoughts on it, but it really wouldn't be pertinent as to it because that's not a legal question. That's a policy decision for you guys, whether or not you want a sunset provision in there. Have I seen communities use sunset provisions? Sure. You know, but do others not? You know, likewise, you know, there. So I really can't, I can tell you from a legal perspective, you have the right to impose a sunset, but whether or not you want to do one is completely a policy decision that's up for the city council.
Thank you for your perspective in that. And I'm going to hit on Mayor Miller again with the same type of question. Mayor Miller, the Liquor Commission discussed this, and you said it was very briefly, I believe, that they discussed the sunset clause. Do you have any perspective on why or why not that would be a good idea?
Well, I'm sure Alderman McClanathan is trying to go in that direction. The Liquor Commission doesn't want the city to look like a bunch of gaming parlors. That's why they put that on there. So, you know, if it's the will of the council, you can always, you know, throw that at the Liquor Commission and have that discussion to be brought back. So, if that's something the council would like us to go in that direction to have that discussion, we've only had some. So that's up to the council.
Manager Crow, your perspective?
Yeah, so just a reminder for council, and I know that the discussion was when we initially adopted the codes way back when the changes were going. We were looking at a 5 to 6 year sunset for all of the gaming parlors, just not these, but we were also looking at, the discussion on council floor was, you know, looking at 10 pennies and looking at the other gaming parlors as we were going forward to make sure everybody, that has not, you know, we have not pursued that any further at this time. But that was the discussion back there and back at that time. And when we had the meetings, that was one of the discussion points that came out of that.
Manager Crow, can you refresh my memory? Who was that meeting with? Was that our council discussion, or was that, I don't remember, I'm sorry.
It was both, came out of both the Liquor Commission and then when we held the public meetings, but it also came into the council in the discussion with the adoption of the codes, so that we would come back to, and then my discussions with each individual that were some very strong board council members that were wanted us to pursue those.
Thank you, sir.
Chair.
Alderman McClanathan.
And by all means, I'm not opposed to sunset provisions on the other remaining entities as well. We haven't forwarded the discussion on it. I was just making the point that I think that there's an even stronger argument for having a sunset being incorporated into these than necessarily on those initial ones. Though I certainly feel comfortable from a legal perspective of being able to impose such a provision if we deem appropriate down the road on those other entities as well.
Yes, Alderman.
Thank you. So if
Burberry.
this ordinance is approved, we'll have basically 4 gaming parlors that do not have to meet the 50-50 requirement.
That's correct.
And all the others in the community have to.
That's correct.
Okay, I guess I personally would be in favor of a sunset of some kind that the organization should come into compliance at some point in time.
So council, what I understand then is if somebody wanted to make a recommendation for their sunset, I think we have to send this back to the Liquor Commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I believe so.
Yes.
Okay. Alderman McClanathan.
Well, I'll wait to see if there's further discussion.
Yes,
Madam Chair.
Alderman Borneman.
Maybe Mr. Cox will know, how long has this 50-50 rule been in place?
About a year.
Well, in its current form, about a year.
Yeah.
It was actually 60%. I believe it was lowered to 50%. It was 60% for, I want to say, the preceding 4 or 5 years ish. So when the number was lowered to 50, it was coupled with a requirement of an accountant's statement. So we actually lowered the percentage of income which had to be derived from food and beverage, but increased the proof required.
So they're required three times within a 5-year period to open their books to us. And we audit them, and we look very closely at the food and beverage tax versus gaming tax when it comes in. The finance department looks very closely at that and comparing them. And they're in communication on a regular basis with the clerk.
Manager Crowe. On the food and beverage, when they're looking at the 50/50 rule, food and beverage is liquor, pop, even bottled water, and any kind of food served on the premise. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the food have to be prepared on the premise, or can it be prepackaged food?
It's prepackaged. We've had this discussion.
Excuse me.
There needs to be a restaurant operated on the premises at all times that gaming is conducted. And they also have to hold a Class 2 or a Category 2 health department license. So it needs to be, outfitted as food service.
So
I'm sorry.
no, so that's one. Some of the gas stations that have gotten the gaming machines have also had. We've been very stringent with the building inspector to make sure that they meet the requirements as we go forward with that.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I do have one more follow-up on that from myself. And with the restaurant requirements, is there a minimum amount of seating or space or capacity
There
that
is.
they have to have?
There
You're
is.
both nodding, so.
Yes, it specifically, I have to get my glasses out.
It's
so I
200 feet, right?
can answer the question. Believe
Sorry,
that's right.
Andrew, Director Zubkov, it's 200 feet, correct, for Aaron?
It's kind of a one-off definition. It has to seat 20 people, at least,
Okay.
20 people, and it needs to be a contiguous area with a minimum of 10 square feet per customer.
So
it's not just 200. If you have 30 seats, then it's 300. But minimum you could do is 20 seats, 200 square feet.
So Mayor Miller is correct in that. Thank you very much for that information. Any other questions, council? Yes, Alderman Borneman.
I'm new to the council. Prior to the 50/50 rule, there was the 60/40 rule, and how long was that in place for?
I would have to take a look to tell you for sure, but it was several years. It wasn't a one-year thing. It was, if I were to guess, and that's all it would be, I would say between 5 and 8.
And during that time, was there the 10 license cap of only 10 restaurants, or how long has that been gone?
It was a higher cap than that. I think there were close to 35. So what happened is the cap went in, it froze at some date. So if you were licensed as of this date, you were okay, but then you couldn't get a new license until somebody else dropped off.
So what we did was the rewrite eliminated the cap on the liquor licenses, but it lowered the amount that they had to sell for food and beverage, but it put it more stringent because they now have to provide their books to us to verify that that's actually. Before it was strictly an estimate as we went forward. Based upon what we're getting for food and beverage versus gaming. Gaming is very open. Food and beverage, we get a disc from the sales tax, basically from the state. Then only 3 of us have access to it.
Okay. And if I have just one follow-up.
Yes.
When it comes to specifically we've been mentioning 10 pennies and Dottie's, when were they allowed in despite the 50/50 requirement? Was that the rewrite about a year ago?
No, that was when the 60/40 went in. So when
Excuse me,
60/40 was initially
Attorney Cox, could you please speak into the microphone
Sorry.
for the record? Thank you.
the grandfather on Dottie's 10 penny. There were actually, I think, 3 more which operate more as traditional bar restaurants, and all of which I believe Clerk Anderson can correct me, but I think all of them came back with accountant statements, and they were in compliance anyway, even though they were technically exempt. So it's really just Dottie's and 10 penny that we're talking about for comparison purposes. they were in operation prior to the implementation of, I believe, the ordinance established both the cap and the 60/40 requirement. Again, I'd have to go back and look. This is just based on my recollection.
So, having dealt with this in another community, 2012, when the state changed its ordinance, there was an ordinance that was sent out to all the communities that basically said, here's how your liquor, here's how your gaming needs to go as we go forward. At that point, many communities started looking at how they did. In 2015, there was a ruling that came down that basically said you can regulate gaming by established, and came down from the state gaming board that says you can regulate how much gaming versus food. So it may have been about that time that they,
And that would make sense based on, again, it's my recollection just as a community member at the time. I mean, that's roughly when that would have happened.
So, if I could just follow.
Yes.
We've had, at this point, approximately 3 to 4 years to initiate a sunset clause, and that hasn't been done.
I don't believe that any sunset has been formally on the floor. To my recollection, I don't believe it's been on the floor.
That's all I have.
Do we have any further discussion, council? Do we have any recommendations by any council member to move it forward
Sure.
or, yes?
I would move to refer it back to the Liquor Commission with them to review implementation of, review potential implementation of a sunset clause.
Second.
So we have a recommendation by Alderman McClanathan to move it back to the Liquor Commission to review the sunset clause. Is that correct? Did I have that correct? And then we have a second by Alderman Berberay. Is a voice vote sufficient for that, Attorney Zetto? Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor of sending this back to the Liquor Commission?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
We have one opposition.
Alderman Brashaw,
Yes, Mayor.
we probably should do something with this, though, because they really need to be legal right now. I mean, we have a business that's operating that really is in limbo.
If I may?
Yes, Attorney Cox.
To the mayor's point, and thank you for raising that, one of the items that's currently on the Liquor Commission agenda anyway is they have the authority under the new code to issue a 60-day temporary license in the event that an application is made but can't be granted for one or more reasons beyond the applicant's control. This fits squarely within that. So I believe what the Liquor Commission will be taking up in addition to this issue, that's been referred back, will be the grant of a 60-day temporary license, just business as usual. So what that would, I would assume, entail would be a liquor and gaming license for South Street and just a liquor license for Silver Creek, because that hasn't been granted the state license anyway at this point. So it would be just a status quo for 60 days while this progresses through council and there's a determination made on that.
I think that they anticipate within the next 60 days to get their license, though. Am I correct? Yeah.
I think there's a meeting scheduled for August.
Yes.
If I recall right.
the state gaming actually was delayed because of they postponed some of their meetings because of the issue going on with the gaming casinos and the state law. So they haven't reviewed a lot of licenses.
So to sum up, Attorney Cox, you need South Street to be issued a temporary 60-day liquor and gaming license, and you need Silver Creek to receive a temporary gaming license for 60 days. Did I get that correct?
You're saying at the commission level?
Liquor Commission.
Yeah.
Do that.
So I guess what is our proposal here then that is necessary? Does someone care to word that exactly?
So, Mayor, I think you think that this needs to move forward, but we need to, I mean, what you're asking is to move this forward to council so that they're legal, but then also tell the liquor commission that they need to look at the sunset clause involved in that.
Actually, the Liquor Commission has the authority to grant that temporary license without council action, but it's just for that 60 days. So if they would choose to exercise that discretion, which again is on their agenda for Thursday, if they choose to exercise that, that would not need to go forward to council. That's, again, a placeholder. And it's basically just to validate what we're doing now, effectively. The question, I believe, that was sent to the Liquor Commission, if I understood it correctly, was simply to consider the implementation of a sunset provision and discuss that and come back with a recommendation as to yay or nay and how long.
We still have a motion on the floor, so how would you recommend we reword that, Attorney Zetto?
Actually, I think you're fine right now because there was a motion made by Alderman McClenathan
Yes.
to refer this matter back to the Liquor Commission for discussion on whether or not to implement a sunset clause. That was seconded, I believe, by Alderman Berberet.
Yes.
And that a vote was taken, and it was 7-1. So that matter is concluded. And then Attorney Cox has indicated that the temporary license, which would address the mayor's point, is on the agenda already for the upcoming Liquor Commission. So I think that's it. I don't think you need anything
So we
else.
don't need to do anything else? Okay.
Correct.
I thought maybe there's an urgent matter here that we still needed to send something forward to the next meeting. No?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions on that as well.
So I think the point of this being on the agenda tonight was just to keep the council up to speed, correct?
Well, the ordinance modification is necessary in order to be able to issue a license, permanent license.
Permanent license, yeah.
So at some point, we do need to address the code modification. So I think what's proposed we take back down to the Liquor Commission is, should the recommendation that came up from the last meeting include a sunset provision, and what should that look like? And I think
Attorney Cox and I discussed that this was better discussed at the CAB before brought in front of council.
Yes.
So we could get guidance from council as we went forward, so.
It was a very wise decision.
I got a question.
Yes, Alderman Parker.
Is this two separate issues? We're talking about getting them a permanent license in the sunset? If it is,
Yes.
I would make a motion to take it to council, because I don't want to play games with these business owners. Say, well, you got 60 days, you got 20 days. They want to run a business. They can't jack around with that. So I'd like to get it to the council and get them their perk, and then we can address the sunset at the next Liquor Commission, in my opinion.
Chair,
Yes, Alderman McClanathan.
they're meeting this Thursday, and there's nothing that prohibits it from coming directly to council at the next scheduled meeting, correct?
That
That's
is correct.
correct.
So the mayor or the city manager can put it back on the agenda for the next council member meeting, excuse me. Any other questions?
So Alderman Parker, just so you know, I would anticipate on Thursday that the commission will grant that temporary, yeah.
It's not important, forget it.
That's okay. Thank you, Attorney Cox, for all your information. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to item number 12, which is public comments. Do we have any public members that would like to speak on agenda or non-agenda items? Yes, Mr. Heiler, Mr. Brian Heiler, I believe. Mr. Heiler, you will have 3 minutes. Please speak into the microphone. Thank you.
My name is Brian Heiler, and I'm owner of South Street Slots. Just wanted to make a few comments just from hearing some of the discussion on tonight. Since the annexation has been over, we've been to the meetings and went to the Liquor Commission when they unanimously, moved forward to have us grandfathered in. And some of the discussion that went on there, and which made me feel good, is they looked at me and they said they did not ask to come to Freeport. We forced them. They're good businesses. Let's grandfather them in. Why are we trying to shut them down?
I would like to ask, out of all of you, has anybody been in and seen what my location looks like? It's not, yep, I knew you were there. It's not what you would think as a gaming parlor. I didn't go in there and get a building in the county and throw 5 machines in there and say, I'm going to start making some money. I looked at my location, being, even though I was in the county, I am a vision of Freeport as they come into town. So the first thing is that's got to look nice. We cleaned it up. We put a lot of money into it. And I didn't want it to just be a bar, people to just come in. I want to give them an experience. And that's what we did. I would invite everybody to come in here and see exactly what we are and what we are offering Freeport as an experience. The memorabilia that we have on the walls. When I decided to lease my other section of the building out, the thing was, okay, I don't want it to be a bar. I don't want it to be, I made sure that there was a game plan and a vision, and that they put a lot of effort into what they were going to do. And I would recommend all of you to take a look. I mean, I'm a little bit jealous. Their game plan, you're going to be wowed by that. I mean, this is a location that when people come, we get people from Rockford, Galena, all over. People that want to play some of the games, the slots, when they come into town. This is going to be a location that they're going to be able to visit. They're going to be able to see memorabilia of Freeport. They're going to be able to see history. As far as the 50-50, if you look at our location, if there's got to be a sunset clause, it's going to shut both of us down. We can't put a kitchen in there. I mean, to go ahead and do hundreds of thousands of dollars of remodeling and adding additions onto the building is just not something I'm prepared to do.
Thank you, Mr. Heiler. Your time is up. And it does look like a remarkable business from the outside. It's not the council's prerogative to want to close down businesses. We just must legislate for the fairness of all in the city of Freeport. Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, we have another Mr. Heiler. Again, sir, you will have 3 minutes, and please speak into the microphone.
My name is Ben Heiler, owner of Silver Creek Gaming Lounge. Yeah, kind of what my dad said. I mean, we definitely aren't a bar. We're not a restaurant. Our game plan wasn't to be a restaurant. We didn't ask to be in the city. We knew what we were doing. We were in the county. I read the ordinance. I mean, for 20 people, I mean, that's going to be difficult to see 20 people there. I mean, if you guys have been into either location, they're quite small gaming lounges. I mean, they weren't built for a restaurant, for a big kitchen. As far as Dottie's and 10 Pennies, like Eric said, it's 3 to 4 years you guys haven't done any sunset provisions. And now you guys all, want to do a sunset provision, which I understand, there's other businesses that don't have to follow the 50/50 rule, but they set up shop in Freeport, okay? They already had those rules in place. We didn't have those rules in place. And just so you guys know, as far as how you set up a gaming lounge, you have to get your corporation set up first. You then have to get a background check. You have to get your county liquor license. You have to get another background check. Then you have to get your state liquor license, another background check. Then you apply for your gaming license. And as we see, you sit on your gaming license for quite a while before they get approved. They got a lot of stuff at the Illinois Gaming Board. They only meet every other month. So again, we've had this in before you guys even started having discussions about annexation. I mean, we had our gaming license in before the first annexation meeting. So, we were set up, we were ready to go, we knew what we were doing, and we aren't set up for food. So I want you guys to think, there's 2 good businesses. We're coming to Freeport. It's good for Freeport. They're going to have plenty of revenue coming off of that. That could help downtown. That could help multiple things in Freeport. In addition to what a beautiful bright spot that looks on South Street now compared to what it was. So I hope you guys all think about this decision because, again, sunsetting, it's going to shut both businesses down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heiler. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? We have Mr. Tommy Tyke. Would you like to step up to the microphone? You have 3 minutes, Tom.
All right. I just wanted to ask, Joey Mo, what's this about building that new thing over by the library? You got an update for that? Art Plaza, Art Plaza.
I'm not sure what the status is on that. Do you know, Director Zupkoff, what's
The Art
happening with the
Plaza?
Art Plaza?
I believe Public Works is doing some sewer and infrastructure work over at the Arts Plaza. Is that right, Director Carr?
So we, as you know, it's a public private venture, primarily given by private dollars to the art museum. Our portion of this was installing the sewer, storm sewer, as well as running the water lines and removing the old parking lot area. It was a in-kind donation from the city. They are moving forward with that, and they plan to be, they were waiting for our storm sewer to be installed before they installed the splash pad. So they are, the splash pad's supposed to be coming in, and then they'll be additionally doing some work. I believe Winter Construction has the contract to be doing the work.
So we are moving forward, Tommy.
Okay, I just wanted to tell you, Joey Mo, you did a good job.
Thanks, Tommy.
And Von Parker, we saw you at USEC Chicago Friday night. You see me dancing up there?
The whole night. That's exactly right, Tom.
Thank you, Tommy. Any other public comments? If not, I'd like a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion by Alderman Busker. Anyone else? Second? Second by Alderman Ross. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Carries. Thank you, folks.